15th. And so as the first few words that I say sometimes gets cut off, I'm going to repeat that. It's Friday the 15th. Now, there was a time when we were pretty excited about Fridays, right? Fridays were leading into the weekend, and that meant maybe a different change of surroundings. But for us all now, it's pretty much the same surroundings every day. Now, I know Arizona's easing up some, and I pray that people continue to exercise common sense. But I don't know how long we're going to be in this mode, but I know that I've enjoyed spending a few minutes coming to you each day, and I pray that some of these little talks have been a blessing or encouragement. I've had some people say, it doesn't really matter what you say, it's just nice to have a time when we can have something regular and that relates to our class. Every day I just try to take time out and settle down a little so that I can focus on talking to you. This morning was a busy morning for me, and I asked somebody that worked for me for a report on something, and what I got back was an excuse. Have you ever given excuses? I know I have. I've given them, and I've received a lot of them. And you know what they say about excuses? Excuses are the skin of a reason stuffed with a lie. It looks like a reason, but when you actually probe and lift up the flap a little, what you find underneath is not true. And I know that people in the world give excuses. The old excuse, well, I couldn't get to work on time today. You know what? That excuse is used a lot. Sickness is reported. It's interesting that we've noticed that we have a couple of employees that are always sick on a Friday. And then I heard that the statistics about flat tires occurring is most prevalent on Monday morning. So maybe they are just really getting flat tire on Monday. Maybe the car's been sitting in the garage, but it's tempting to think that, well, maybe that was an excuse. I read the story of a police officer who was saying that he has seen every kind of excuse for speeding and for bad driving. And he basically said, look, if I talk to the person and what I hear is a reason, then I'll probably let them off. But if what I hear is an excuse, then I'm going to give them a ticket. So apparently one day he's sitting there at the side of the road, and here comes this car zooming through the intersection, a traffic light, and it's red. There's nobody coming the other way, but this person just shoots straight over the lights, doesn't slow down, and so the policeman eventually pulls this person over, and it was a young lady, and she said, well, the reason that I didn't slow down was I just had my brakes repaired, and it was very expensive, and I didn't want to wear them down. So I guess she got the ticket. So, I was just thinking as I was preparing to talk to you for a minute or two, I was thinking about, the greatest set of verses that talks about excuses is the story that the Lord told in Luke 14, and I'll read it to you. The Lord said, then he said unto him, a certain man made a great supper, and he bade many. And he sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, come, for all things are now ready. And they all, with one consent, began to make excuses. The first one said, I've bought a piece of ground, and I must go and see it. I pray that you'll have me excused. Well, that was not a reason, right? That was an excuse, because the reality, you bought a piece of ground, you've already bought it, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be there tomorrow. So that wasn't an excuse. That wasn't a reason, that was an excuse. Another said, I've bought 5 yoke of oxen and I want to go prove them. So, you mean you bought some oxen and you didn't know what you bought? That's not a reason, that's an excuse. Another said, I've married a wife and therefore I cannot come. Well, maybe that one's getting close. Maybe if he's a newlywed, he probably shouldn't be going off to a party. But it says in verse 21, so that the servant came and showed his lord these things. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servants, go out quickly into the streets and the lanes of the city, and bring in the hither, the poor, the maimed, the halt, and the blind. And the servant said, Lord, it will be done as thou hast commanded, and yet there is room. And the Lord said unto the servant, go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be full. And here's the verse that I always thought was kind of sad, because the Lord said to his servant, he said, for I say unto you, none of those which were bidden shall taste of my supper. Do you get that? I don't know about you, when I read that story, I want to amp up my commitment to be obedient. There's so many people who are more able to give excuse than they are to do what was asked of them. And I'm not talking about work, I'm talking about in the kingdom of God. Many people have tendered reasons why they can't follow Christ. They've delayed obedience. And guess what? Delayed obedience is what? Disobedience. Because until you obey, you are living in disobedience. And the sad thing is that many of those who were disobedient lost out, because some of them went on to be with the Lord, or they didn't go on to be with the Lord, but their time on earth was over before they were ever able to move into a position of obedience. The whole concept of recognizing that excuses delay or probably even prevent our living in blessing. Because until we say, yes, Lord, then we're living in a place of disobedience. I know that in the world, in the business world, there are many stories of how excuses have damaged people. I remember the story of a man named Gary Kildall. He was a man that in 1973, he wrote an operating system for computers. It was well used. It was widely used. I remember using it. It was called CPM. And in 1983, IBM, who were getting into the personal computer world, they invited Gary to go and talk to them and demonstrate his system. But the time they wanted him to come, Gary had other plans. He told them that he was very busy and he couldn't spare the time. But in fact, he just bought a new airplane and he decided to go fly his airplane. So the IBM guys, I guess, they felt snubbed and offended. And they called up this guy who had this little tiny company. It was a company that you may have heard of. It was called Microsoft. And so those guys abandoned talking to Kildall and CPM, and they switched to talking with this guy named Bill Gates. So today, Bill Gates is one of the richest half dozen men in the world. I think he's maybe number 2 now. But that excuse cost that man a lot. Those excuses tendered by those different people that were invited to the feast cost them, because the Lord of the feast, the king, the whatever he was, the rich man, said none of them are even going to taste this feast. So as I was thinking about all this today, I just thought, Lord, help me not to be an excuse maker. Help me when I feel your presence, or when I feel your direction, or when I'm prompted to do something. Lord, help me to be obedient. I don't know if you all heard the message given by Todd Matchett this last Wednesday, but he talked about, they're in this series of messages on a single word, and we've had the word being yes and no, and We've had the word on help, but Todd talked about the message, or talked about the word go. I'd encourage you to go back and look at that on the church archives. But that was my thought for the day. Lord, help me to be somebody that goes. Help me not to be somebody that just sits and makes excuses. Because I know that you're looking for obedience. What does the word say? Obedience is better than sacrifice. He doesn't want our sacrifice. He wants our obedience. And man, that would preach, right? So I'm just going to stop. Otherwise, I'm going to get off, and it's going to be a longer video than you want to watch. But I pray you're all doing well. Keep in touch. Send us those praise reports. Send us the prayer requests when you have them. We're seeing some answers to prayer. And I hope and pray that we'll be able to meet soon. But until then, I'll see you again tomorrow. God bless you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.